This is an Oxford. Its main characteristic is that the quarter is sewn into the vamp and the tongue is an independent pattern piece on its own. Now, either of Oxfords or derbies can be brogues. So the brogues are those design holes that are put on the shoes to give it some kind of classic look. So let's talk about what you will learn in this course. We will deal with how to create the pattern of Oxford uppers, also deal with how to create the pattern of the linings. We will deal with stitching and coupling all of the parts together, and then we will last everything. So welcome to Fundamentals of Creating Oxford Patterns. Before we talk about Oxford shoes particularly, let's talk about shoes and shoemaking generally. If you take any well-made shoe, you'd find that there appears to be the widest point running from the outside to the inside, and if you draw an imaginary line, you'd find that the backside starts and the front side start and terminate about 1 cm behind that imaginary line running from the ball on the outside to the ball on the inside. Now, most shoes also have some kind of toe box. So you would also find that the toe box, typically it's about 1/4 of the entire length of the entire shoe. And that's something that you find in most well-made shoes. Like this derby boots that I have here, you'd find that the toe cap is about 1/4 of the entire length. And if you draw that imaginary line from the outside ball to the inside ball, you find that the backside of the shoe starts about 1 cm behind that line. So the front part of the shoe would also terminate like 1 cm behind that line. And you find that everything basically on the shoe is in quarters. So the quarter of the shoe terminates about 1/4, and then the vamp takes about 2/4, and then the toe box itself takes about 1/4 of the entire length. So these are the principles that guide me in shoe design, and I will be bringing them to bear in this course on Oxfords. The equipment and tools we will need, and then we will start first of all by finding the last length of the last that we are going to use. As you can see, it's about 26 cm on this last. Once you have found the last length, you would have to draw the center line. So you just eyeball the center in the front and at the back, and then use a straight edge to connect the dots. You can also draw a straight line on a piece of masking tape and then use that straight line to connect the dots, as you see that I did in this case. Now let's find the widest points on this last. We do that by placing the last tangential to a flat surface and mark out the widest points where it touches that flat surface. So you do so at the inside and at the outside, and then using your flexible tape, you connect those 2 points. This line that you just drew that connects the ball on the inside to the ball of the outside is known as the vamp line, and the point where it intersects with the center line in front is called the vamp point. We'll measure from the vamp point to the ball of the outside and divide it into 2. Now, once you have found your last length and have also your center lines, I think it's a wise thing to just calculate 1/4, 1/5, and 1/8 of that last length. So that means you find 1/4 of your last length, that's divide your last length by 4, 1/5, that's divide your last length by 5, and 1/8 divide your last length by 8. Now, the reason why we do that is because of some cardinal points that we need to find on the last. The first is the counterpoint, and it is 1/5 of the last length. So you remember when we found 1/5 of the last length, it came to 5.2 cm. So we mark that at the center line at the back, upward, and then if we add 1 cm to that counterpoint, we'll find another point, which is the back height. Now let's draw a line from the counterpoint to the middle point in between the vamp point and the ball, outside ball. This line is known as the quarter line. Well, the quarter line is very important and you would see why. But let's find another cardinal point, which is the instep. The instep is 1/4, 1/4 of your last length, and when we did that calculation, 1/4 came to 6.5 cm. So we'll measure the instep from the vamp point, upward on the center line in front, and just mark that in 6.5 cm. Now let's draw a line from the back height to the same point where the quarter line starts. Then we will measure the quarter line and divide it into 2. So we'll mark the middle point there, and then from the instep, if we draw a line from the instep to that middle point on the quarter line, we will have another line called the tongue line. Now this tongue line, I will typically want the total of the tongue line to be 1/4 of the last length, meaning that since we are designing on one side of the last, we will use 1/8 of the last length. Remember, when we did our calculation, 1/8 of the last length came to 3.25. So we'll measure 3.25 on that tongue line. At that point, which is also the terminal point of our tongue, forms the point from where we can curve the rest of the top line of the shoe onto that line running from the back height. Now if we draw a point about 50 millimeters, half a centimeter beneath the middle of the vamp line on the right, we can now draw a line from that terminal point of the tongue down towards it to give us a reference for the inside part of our tongue. Now let's do the capto, since what we want to do is a capto Oxford. The measurement that I use for where the capto starts is about 1/4 of the last length. When we did our calculation, we found 1/4 of the last length to be 6.5. Basically just add about half a centimeter to that point and drew in the capto. The capto I draw by drawing a right angle from the point I have identified towards the feather edge. If you notice, I just aligned the line on my paper rule to the center line, and then that gives me an easy way of drawing the right angle. Now, the rest of the quarter and its facing, I went ahead and drew in first, but I'm going to explain to you what's going on. So the facing, I typically like to start about 1 cm away from the vamp point. Then I draw a right angle from that point towards the outside. Then I'll measure 1/8 of the last length on that line that I just drew. And it is from that point that I will draw in a curve which will join my quarter line and meet it at a point which is 1/4 of the quarter line. So just measure half of the quarter line that we drew earlier on. So I curve in to that 1/4 point, and then the midway region from the quarter line also gives me a point on the feather edge that I can curve in the rest of the quarter. Let's just finish the tongue. I will mark about 1.5 cm on the facing line and draw a line from the tongue width, and then also draw in that design curve that you saw at the end there. So ladies and gentlemen, these are just guiding principles. If you notice, I did not do so much to make the sketching fancy, because I'm still going to reproduce a sketch and on a flat piece of paper. So that's going to be the subject of our next class, which will deal with creating the mean forms as well, and then representing our design on a 2-dimensional paper surface. So thank you for sticking by up until this time. God bless you, and catch you in the next class.